Good evening, everybody. This is Lorraine Alternative Homesteading. It's January 20th, 2024. And I'm going to continue reading the testimony of Adrian Columb. But before I do, please hit the thumbs up. Again, this is with permission. And Pigs Might Fly by Adrian Columb. The disclaimer is, this historical account is intended to serve as my testimony about the events described if I cannot give it in person. Some of the names, places, and affiliations mentioned have been changed to protect the innocent. Apart from that, the story is as in real life. I can unmask the obfuscated details if there's good reason, but would prefer not to for safety reasons. A vast wealth of details has also either been summarized or omitted in the interest of brevity and because my deadline is tight, but I can potentially elaborate on and or explain those on request. This history is mostly presented in chronological order, but wherever that is not the case, I have noted the year, for example, where I draw connections or comparisons with more recent events. So we're going to continue on to number 15, Death Trap. This is actually page 14. The trap was set on a small, unnamed road that runs parallel to the northern side of Melbourne's Eastern Freeway, off Yarra Valley Road. Google Maps says it has a historic relic bluestone pillar on the left when coming down the steep hill. One corner of the Westfield South Oval is quite close to the location where the large rock was clearly intended to kill me, was placed on the road at the bottom of it. As I drove down the hill, I saw a yellow taxi parked on my side of the road. Due to some recent experiences, I was already suspicious that some taxis were used as undercover cars, so I was alert but not yet alarmed. As I came down the hill toward the taxi, it pulled out across my lane and stopped. I could see the right-hand driver's side of the car. A man then got out of the left-hand side back passenger door, bent down out of my view for a few seconds, and put the large rock on the road in the path of my car, hidden from my view by their vehicle. He stood upright again and turned to look at me for a moment, seemingly checking if the rock was aligned with my front right driver's side wheel, then got back into the car. His height, frame, and the shape of his head were seemingly the same as those of Joe, who had attacked me at my home that morning. Though I could not see his face very well, or that of the driver either, I am certain that it was Joe. There was also no one else who even remotely wanted to hurt me, let alone murder me, so Joe, his boss, and several of his teammates at the time all clearly know about the incident. One of their unmarked gray military-style helicopters also flew across my field of vision from right to left as I came down that hill, seemingly in order to draw my gaze upwards so I would be distracted and so hopefully wouldn't notice the death trap being set for me on the ground. At the last minute, the taxi pulled out of my lane slowly, blocking the other lane to box me in, so I had nowhere to go but straight at the rock. When the taxi moved out of my lane, it was also already too late for me to see the rock in time to stop. I pumped the brakes to try to slow down, but I couldn't do so quickly enough. This setup was clearly a tactical maneuver designed so that I would hit the rock and be unalived. Sadly for my attackers, as mentioned earlier that night, I had heard Joe and his boss talking about putting something under my car. While I didn't yet know the specific form of the coming attack, I was lucky to be driving my mother's car, which was sturdier and higher off the ground than my own. I managed to steer enough to at least not hit the rock with the front wheel, and luckily I cleared it and went right over the top. It would almost certainly have ended my life if I hadn't hit it. The incident happened in a dead-end road, so I made a quick U-turn, stared slack-jawed at the large rock as I passed it in the opposite lane, counted my lucky stars to have survived, and saw the taxi speeding away up the hill. The attack was seemingly coordinated by the crew of the helicopter. The federal agents who used that aircraft on that night in 2010 may have been from a joint state federal police task force, for example, Piranha. So the aircraft may have belonged to Victoria Police, but the AFP also have their own pilots and aircraft, so maybe no Victoria Police officers were involved. There may yet be evidence available that proves what I've said about that attempt on my life, and I am seeking it out while at the same time being actively deterred from doing so by Australian federal agents Joe and his corrupt colleagues, who are currently trying to end my life here in Tenerife. If it can be determined who was in that undercover car, for example, who placed and then hid that rock on the road, and who was the getaway driver, and or if it can be established who was in the helicopter on that night, for example, if it becomes possible to access as yet elusive historical GPS ADSB radar records, it would then be possible to know who was involved in that attempt to unalive me. I sped up the hill, followed the taxi across the small overpass, and then down onto the motorway again, where I lost sight of it as I sped away from there as fast as I could, totally terrified again for the second time that day. That night I crawled into my sleeping parents' bedroom and slept on the floor beside their bed for safety, hoping the AFP team was not willing to unalive all three of us just to silence me. I was extremely traumatized by the realization that these AFP federal agents had in fact just tried to kill me, and terribly frightened by the potential implications of that for my future. I have since been diagnosed with post-traumatic stress disorder directly related to events mentioned in this history, two of the most traumatic of which by far were being assaulted and then almost unalived on the same day by federal police as described above. After these police officers tried to end my life, I then shielded myself from them as best I could for as long as I could, still totally terrified by the attempts on my life and the ongoing harassment program, until I finally managed to flee from Australia to exile overseas in mid-2012. Number 16. Preview of future history. In a very brief summary of the period between fleeing Australia into exile and the present day, during 4 unavoidable visits home to Australia in the past decade, the same AFP team made my life a living hell, including twice when I returned briefly in 2018 for my father's funeral, and then again a few weeks later for his memorial service. Seemingly nothing is sacred to them, even harassing me on the day of my dad's funeral while I was grieving for the loss of a beloved parent. Several weeks later, their aircraft also seemingly flew over as I was sprinkling some of his ashes on the finish line at Flemington Racecourse after his memorial service there, at which I had just spoken about him, and so was already very emotional. Again, clearly nothing is sacred to these thugs, and no opportunity for psychological attack of their target is too cruel. Birthdays are another favorite opportunity to really torment me, but any special occasion will do. Though I'm not sure of the exact model of helicopter used in the 2010 attack. It was very similar in appearance to Victoria Police's 3 newly acquired Augusta Westland AW-139s, one of which was used to terrorize me on at least 2 occasions. In Melbourne in September 2020, those 2020 flyovers by a dark gray-brown AW-139 with flight number POL-32 can be seen in videos I filmed during both apparent harassment attempts as I was preparing to flee the country again while living at 10 Lumley Court, Prahran in Melbourne. The first example, from the 16th of September 2020, is in pieces in the 3 videos at, and he posts links to the videos. I can cut and paste them into the description of this video. So it's https vimeo.com/542-795-112, and the same goes for number 542-795-455, 542-795-208, and now see the flight path in the video at https vimeo.com/690662725, or directly at https://www.flightradar24.com 2020-09-16//10-10/10/pol32/2583 lowercase f1d. If you make an account and log in which you can see how it flies across the front of my apartment several times for several minutes as I film it. The second example, from 23rd September 2020, playable at vimeo.com, 542-788-532, shows the exact same helicopter doing the same apparent terror tactics, but even worse at that time, and lasting 15 plus minutes. Now see the flight path playback in the video, vimeo.com, 689829104, or directly at www.flightradar24.com 2020-08-22/02:15/12X/P-OL-32/2556 lowercase FBC8 if you make an account and log in. In them you can see the helicopter's flight path during the airborne terrorism session goes directly above where my apartment was, and also directly in front of me several times as I filmed it during that disgraceful, terrifying testosterone display. Now, imagine such terrifying flyovers happening over and over again, wherever you go in your city, and subsequently across the world. I can also present numerous other example videos and or flight path playbacks of terrifying flyover sessions up to 40 plus minutes in duration, both in Australia and also overseas by similar fleets of aircraft owned by foreign federal police forces or chartered locally. It is all perpetuated by the same criminal police abusing their power and our public funds for their own objectives. In this case, suppression and covering up of attempted unaliving with unaliving. I have tried to be thorough in the chronology above, but as I mentioned at the beginning, it is nonetheless significantly abbreviated, and many events have therefore either been summarized or omitted, so please feel free to ask for more details about those and other events. In light of the attempts on my life, the physical assaults, and the threats of extreme violence I have endured, the Australian federal agents responsible would clearly much prefer to end my life instead of facing the consequences of the things they have done to me over the years, and which they continue to do with ever more ferocious intensity in the present. I hope Victoria Police and Victoria's public prosecutors have a field day with this one. If they summons Joe, his handlers, and his teammates back to Australia from Europe to face the crimes they committed in Victoria, and if I'm still able to help with an official inquiry by then, I will gladly assist in putting these lawless criminal power abusers behind bars so they can't terrorize, torture, or attempt to unalive me or anyone ever again. To everyone else, I will get the rest of the story out if and when I possibly can, but I need to take a break from sitting in one place where they can readily target me. So it may be a while, if ever. After more than a decade living in exile overseas, apart from a few brief, unavoidable trips home, as I mentioned previously, I was forced back to Melbourne by the Jabby 19 pandemic in early April 2020. The situation escalated even further while I was stuck in the same city for 6 months with these corrupt federal agents who clearly still wanted to unalive me. I was in contact with Victoria Police Detective Senior Constable Paul Thomas, which is his real name, about a recent home invasion by some large men who had tried to force their way into my apartments at 10 Lumley Court in Prahran, who were quite plausibly AFP agents, though I didn't say that to the detective for fear of provoking further reprisal. Oops, I just scrolled too past. 1 second. Joe and his colleagues were seemingly particularly enraged by an email I sent to the detective asking if I could still press charges over the 2010 assault, to which he replied, quote unquote, absolutely. So enraged, in fact, that this time they followed me overseas when I fled, evidently to try to silence me once and for all by finishing the job of unaliving me. I've been very lucky to avoid that outcome so far, but they are working hard day by day to end me. It's been an extraordinary journey since I fled Australia again in early August 2020. These police terrorists have really doubled down on their bet that no one will be able to work them out and try to stop them before they manage to eliminate me and bury as much of the story as possible along with me. They may yet be correct about that, but I'm determined that the rest of the story should also be told if possible. I'm a survivor, but let's see. To be honest, if I am to survive this ongoing ordeal, then I could really use and would really appreciate some help from people more powerful than myself, who carry out the rule of law, democracy, and the preservation of human rights. For example, honest senior police, politicians, journalists, and or civil society organizations in Australia and or overseas. And let me just scroll up here. My cursor just disappeared. I trust this historical account has been informative. I would not have gone so public with the story if any of the parties I have complained to about the ongoing terror operation at seemingly almost all levels of law enforcement, government, and the media in Australia, and also, to some extent, same overseas, had not either dismissed me out of hands or not even replied. I feel your pain, Adrian. This is happening to you, me, everyone. Gaslighting. The parties concerned all seemingly either unwittingly or knowingly protect federal agents from scrutiny. But as Australian folk music legend Paul Kelly sang, quote, "From little things, big things grow," unquote. So I live in hope. Unless someone investigates the AFP officers concerned, then they will seemingly literally get away with my unaliving, but nobody's rushing out to investigate these blatantly corrupt police. At least not so far, but that's not surprising considering how dangerous an enemy they make for. If I had the choice, I would also steer well clear of them. But there are those who should, and if given the right motivation, just might investigate them, as corrupt conduct by Australian federal agents clearly falls under their purview, primarily the Australian Commission for Law Enforcement Integrity, which is ACLEI, which the agents clearly fear, but which dismissed my complaint. The AFP's Office of Professional Standards, which the agents clearly don't fear as much, and which also dismissed my complaint. The AFP's commissioner, who didn't reply to my emails, one of which I was returned to me in Freedom of Information request for everything the agency has on file about me. The Federal Minister for Home Affairs, whose portfolios these AFP agents fall under, who could seemingly fire them all today, but who has ignored my repeated requests for assistance. The Federal Foreign Minister, who has ignored my requests for help, and whose diplomats in Germany stopped replying when I requested they come with me to the police, who, incidentally, I copied on the email, whose Commissioner Sunderman of the Landeskriminalamt, also known as the Berlin State Police, State Criminal Police, replied, and whose detectives seemingly then spent many subsequent months investigating the matter. Then there is the Federal Attorney General, who seemingly needs to authorize such international operations as this in the first place, and who must seemingly have been hoodwinked into doing so. Several of the overseas federal police agencies which facilitate the international terror program by hosting these Australian federal agents, providing them with equipment, surveillance officers, aircraft, cars, etc. on a reciprocal basis, so they are reluctant to investigate their guests. Then there is Interpol, Europol, and or Eurojust, which must have also been tricked into facilitating these agents' terrorism, torture, and aspirations of me for unaliving. The Joint Parliamentary Committee on Intelligence and Security, whose oversight can seemingly penetrate the operational wall, members of which, including its chairman, have ignored my repeated requests for help. The Commonwealth Ombudsman, who oversees complaints against the public service, who has also ignored my complaints. The Public Service Commissioner, whose role is admittedly limited to the agents limited as the agents would need to volunteer for assessment, which is an unlikely scenario. The many journalists who are either too biased or too busy to look at enough of the evidence to see that the truth of the matter is too scared to cover up the story when they realize it's true. And last but certainly not least, our elected Prime Minister, who, by his own recent public admission, the buck always stops with, but who has also ignored my many requests for his help to end these Australian federal agents' terrorism campaign against me. All these checks and balances have failed to provide the safety net for society and its citizens that they were intended to. As mentioned, I have contacted all of the above and have either been dismissed out of hand or outright ignored. Seemingly the only thing that could get any of them moving on this is public outrage generated, for example, through exposure in the media. But as described, there's a perpetual catch-22 preventing such stories from reaching the news cycle. And these corrupt police know that all too well. The system is clearly broken. The intentional terrorism campaign to suppress and evidently also eliminate me as soon as possible is relentless, having spanned at least 7 countries so far, including Australia, Germany several times, Spain twice, Romania, the Netherlands, France, the United Kingdom, and probably also throughout Scandinavia, the Indian subcontinent, and Asia previously, all of which you will also learn about if I survive long enough to tell those parts of the history. According to AFP Office of Professional Standards' reply to my complaint email sent in early February 2021, there was no person-entity record about me in the AFP's Police Real-Time Management Information System, which is PROMIS, P-R-O-M-I-S, in 2009. The overt surveillance cum harassment program waged against me from that time onward in Melbourne was therefore almost certainly, quote-unquote, off the books, also known as totally illegal. But to operate with such impunity internationally as currently, these agents must have left a paper trail. Example, they must have falsified jurisdiction for a major criminal investigation as a cover for their terrorism campaign. Example, through Interpol abuse. So at least that's a positive outcome of my having fled their tyranny in Australia into exile. I just hope the other federal police forces hosting them overseas are more honest than their disgracefully corrupt guests, and that they will soon decide to shut the terror operation down once and for all. I also hope I can survive that long, but maybe only the subsequent victims of the same police terrorists will benefit from my efforts to expose them. I at least wanted to publish this part of the history now, just in case I'm not able to do so later. The truth of the origins of this extraordinary matter needed to be made public, and there should be consequences for the corrupt police officers responsible. I'm also in the process of analyzing further evidence that I've collected, and I'm preparing it for imminent public release. In the meantime, you can see some of the evidence I've collected so far in many of the posts from the past year plus on my LinkedIn profile and in the videos on my Vimeo account. See the links on page 1. Without having read the above part of the history, many of my public posts may seem outrageous. And without having read the as yet unwritten further history, in particular from 2020 to the present, some posts may still seem wild. But I haven't lied to you, and I never will, so please bear with me as I continue the piecemeal process of collecting and publishing further evidence against these well-trained criminal intelligence police who know how to hide their tracks, while they continue to try to unalive me in ways that give them plausible deniability. Well, thank you so much, Adrian. I'm just going to give a little bit of feedback here. First of all, if anybody reads this accounting of what has happened to you and is gaslighting you in disbelief, you know that they're complicit. The fact that you have flew to so many different countries, and this followed you, is a testament that this is a worldwide corrupt program. It's worldwide. It is extremely well funded. It's so well documented and riveting I mean, if I could use that word, riveting. um, and I'm actually, it's horrifying that anyone has to live like this, fleeing for your life as if you're a convicted criminal, that you escaped from the maximum security penitentiary, which is not the case. And I'd like to add something, because targeted people are led to believe that they have done something bad in the past, that it was because of their past behaviors that they're being tortured now, that they're placed in this program to fix what they did wrong in the past. I can assure you that everybody walking this planet has done something wrong in the past. We were all children, right? We were all children. We were all testosterone and estrogen laden adolescents. We all experimented. We all had friends that we may or may not have liked. We may have had friends that were not the best for us, that we associated with them, and by association may have been looked at as being like them when we were not. This is life. This is what happens in life. And I guarantee the criminals that are perpetrating these crimes against you and me and everybody else have had similar experiences, similar backgrounds. In fact, it is widely known, at least here in the United States, that many people that go into the police force were bullied as children. That's right, they were bullied. So they don't want that to happen again. So they enter the police force. And then what happens is, I mean, we all know this. If you don't heal your past, if you don't deal with your demons, you're forced to repeat them over and over again. Whatever we repress is distorted, and it just surfaces in horrific ways. So, for instance, let's say many of these officers that are tracking you down, maybe they were abused as children, maybe they were bullied, maybe they had an authoritarian parent and they decided to go into the police force, but they haven't dealt with their demons. So they have chosen instead to seek revenge upon you and other people, rather than on the parents that torture them, rather than on a parent that put them down, rather than on the kids that may have bullied them. And this is just, one perspective. I'm sure that my viewers will have other perspectives. And Pigs Might Fly by Adrian Columb. So, some other takebacks is that as a Brian Coffrin, private security consultant, whistleblower, has clearly stated numerous times that this is a behavior modification program and that they target the best of the best. He stated in testimony that most targeted individuals are highly intelligent. And clearly, Adrian, you have outdid yourself with this, with your testimony, your disclaimer, your evidence, the fact that you have undergone some medical testing to prove your claim. You've got a lawsuit. Where do you go, though? Absolutely. Where do you go? You've also clearly documented, on these last pages of the groups that you've contacted. I'm sure that we've got people that are listening that have a similar list of agencies, professional agencies that you've contacted that are in a position to be able to assist, that it's their jobs to assist, and instead dismiss your complaint, ignore your complaints, don't respond to your complaint. They're ignored. And even though you repeatedly ask for assistance, you're completely ignored. You don't receive responses. This is common. This is unfortunately so common. This is why it's so difficult for targeted people to gain legal representation. So, but it's clearly you're highly intelligent. I would venture to say that you have a very high IQ. And I haven't had time. And the couple of times that I went to Vimeo, it was telling me that at least the primary link was not coming up for me. It was telling me that it didn't exist. But now that you have outlined the detailed, let's see, up here, the detailed links, the individual links, I will cut and paste those and go directly there. If I have to create an account, I'll create an account. So anyway, thank you so much for offering this testimony. And I do hope that you add some more paragraphs to this and give us an update from 2020 to 2023. And of course, I mean, we're into 2024. We're almost at the end of January already, which is unbelievable how fast January's gone. But I know as a targeted person myself that every day it's something. Even if it's a little thing. I mean, right now we've got, probably over the last week, a foot of snow, which is very unusual in Kentucky. And the criminals are not driving back and forth, but that's usually the case in the wintertime. They take off, and then they're on raring to go by March. I'm sure this happens to you too, depending on the weather by you. But I found it really interesting. I just wanted to mention about the duct work. Now, I've heard this from other people. Now, as I'd mentioned, when I lived in Manalapan, New Jersey, I know what my duct work looked like. It was not nearly it wasn't large enough for a person to get into. I mean, although there was some duct work in the attic that was a little bit larger than like the duct work for the forced hot air. But they would actually throw things, toxic substances, into the ductwork. Yellow substance, that yellow drippy stuff. But that was absolutely fascinating that you uncovered that there was actual person in there. And that you blew that stuff in there and you hear this person coughing. That was phenomenal. You actually caught the creep. But anyway, I hope everybody is doing well. Please hit the thumbs up on testimony, sharing testimony stories, part 2, Adrian Columb. And if, again, this is just a plea for anybody out there. If you have the technological skills to piece together part 1 and part 2, that would be wonderful. I just didn't have enough time yesterday to do another half an hour or 40 minutes onto what I'd already read. And I was actually, my voice was getting tired. And, the night before I'd had like a 4-hour sneezing fit. Thank you, criminals, for the 4-hour sneezing fit. So, so like my throat is a little scratchy and stuff. So anyway, thank you so much, Adrian. I'm going to piece this together put this together for you. I hope you enjoyed the little the little flying pig thumbnail. I thought it was really cute. I didn't realize how many of them there are on the internet, and they're free. So this is Lorraine Alternative Homesteading. Hit the thumbs up if you enjoyed it, and please feel free to share this testimony. And I'm going to sign off for now, exposing one criminal at a time.